Let's talk money.
I don't have your money.
I know I'd be a lot happier with some extra cash.
Is this about money?
Obviously, this is all about money.
Oh, man, we got bills to pay, buddy.
With practical tips and a focus on scripture, let's talk money. With Dave and Reb. From More Than Enough. Real conversations about money for real people. Let's talk money.
Are you ready to talk money, Reb?
I'm ready to talk money.
You are ready this morning.
Well, I think we should ask the listeners, are you ready to talk money?
Are you ready to talk money? Hey, that's a good one.
I know.
I had not thought of that.
I know.
Right
He just pointed. You can't see it on the radio, but he pointed.
I pointed at the YouTube.
I pointed at you. Yeah, so you can go watch it on YouTube.
Yes, we could maybe.
Let's talk money.
We could add maybe a big, kind of one of those big pointy fingers in the YouTube. Anyways, we won't do that. But welcome to the show.
I recently looked at how many subscribers we have on your YouTube channel, and it's growing.
Nice.
And I hope it's not just my kids. So
we did ask our kids to subscribe with all of their, all of the different email addresses they have, because everybody has. Like
okay,
six
all you
addresses.
CHRI listeners, because we know there are a lot of you. If you're actually listening to this on the radio, go to YouTube. Let's Talk Money with Dave and Reb and subscribe.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
So Rebecca has made the request. And
you get to see our beautiful faces in person. Mm-hmm. So we're still learning. I'm still learning how to look at you and look at the camera and all that stuff. So, okay.
You're doing a fine job.
Let's talk money.
Let's talk money with Dave and Reb on YouTube, Spotify.
And wherever you get a podcast.
Wherever you get your podcast. Apple, iTunes, of course. Yeah. And in those places, please do hit the subscribe button. That's very helpful. But we're also on morethanenough.ca, chri.ca, and notmine.ca. Again, those places, if you're a little technology challenged, you just go to the website, hit the play button, and guess what? You can just listen. So.
And I would like to tell you that my book is now on Amazon, finally.
Great.
Except I hesitate to say it because I really want you to go to morethanenoughbooks.com because it supports Yaris Publishing and me in a, with a...
Let's just say that Amazon takes a cut, and
it's a big cut.
Really like giving,
but it's on Amazon if you really want to get the free shipping and get my book. So there you go. Okay, let's talk money.
Reb, you have something that you're like, I wanna.
This topic today is Dave's idea. So if you want to listen, then you can.
But it's my idea. But you were like, oh yes, we could talk.
Yeah.
about
So
that.
I went and did a little bit of research actually, and the word that Dave gave to me was the word assumptions, and that in your relationship with clients, or especially in the mortgage department, because you are a mortgage agent, you are finding that the questions and the assumptions, how did you word it to me? You said normal assumptions around mortgages and home ownership are being questioned. So we're going to talk about as my dear friend Ian Henderson says, there's no such thing as normal. What we're used to is now being questioned. What we were used to in the mortgage world with our interest and how we see our houses growing in value, some of those assumptions are now being questioned by you, the general public. So we're going to talk about this, but I want to start with James 4 because this is a verse we talked a bit about during COVID, I guess there's still COVID's out there. So, but in the pandemic lockdowns, we talked about this verse a lot in James 4 because it talks about making assumptions about the future.
Right.
And what does God teach us through the book of James? 4 verse 13, come now you who say today or tomorrow we'll go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. Right. And I don't know if you've listened to us for a while, you've probably heard me say this. My mom, when she was alive, would say that often to me growing up. And Lord willing, we'll see you again when you come back to Niagara. We'll see you, Lord willing. And I'm like, oh, that's such a cliche. but I knew it wasn't because it's the word of God. So I shouldn't look at it with disdain, but it's
but
just
it was
one of those
Christian. I mean, I grew up in that environment as well. And maybe that's a generational thing. We don't say it as much. I think we probably should say it way more. But, I grew up in that environment too, where it was like, well, as the Lord wills, or, like there was always this, we're going to make a plan. But, in our language, as you say with the cliche, we would say, yeah, but the Lord willing, right? Or, and the Lord willing, or, if the Lord wills, or something like that. So, like I said, I think it's not bad.
And Serena and I, my daughter and I, what are the three things we say? Lord willing, health providing, and weather permitting. Because between the ice storm we just had, and Dave and I finally got COVID after 3 years. Those things you can't just do what you were planning, because life happens in different ways. So we're looking at this word assumption and financial assumptions today, and how the questions around what we thought should be happening in the future is changing. And you and I were talking this morning about how some of that comes from the questions we're hearing, which is...
So, I mean, a lot of people are talking about, and I get this question often enough. I'm not going to say every week, but often enough. This is, how do we live in this crazy world that we live in, or how do we navigate the finances with all of the changes and all of the things that are going on, and going back to James 4, just as a little caveat, James 4, just before that, and I think it's verse 6 it's around verse 6. The context of that is that he's saying God opposes the proud. Like, the assumption is linked to pride. We can just assume that the same thing that happened is going to happen in the same way. Right. And so, James is saying this, and I think the Lord is always, check the amount of when we start to make assumptions, the amount of pride that we have connected to those assumptions, right? So there's a little heart check maybe we want to do there first. Is I'm going to assume that my plans are the plans that we're going to make, or again, and I think that there's a caution there, and James really hooks those two together in James 4 to say, listen, pride and assuming. God opposes the proud, and he brings, he builds up the humble. I mean, all of those things we know, those are hard to live. Those are hard to put into practice. And so that saying that if the Lord wills and meaning it, I think is really important.
Right. And my mom did mean it. Yeah. Like we were aware, especially as she got older, I'll see you again, Lord willing. Lord willing. And it is a Lord willing, because we live 6 hours away, and as she aged, we didn't know if the next time we would see her. We often had those conversations, but I want to. So we're talking about this assumption. I want to say that I went and put financial assumptions in Google. Right. And what spit out at me was this...
All kinds of good stuff.
All good, guys are good at the financial modeling assumptions. Yeah. And we're going to talk about how businesses do some financial modeling for the future in anticipation of how the market's going to work, the economy, and how their business is going to perform, right? Mm-hmm. We even do that in More Than Enough. And so we do a few things that we're gonna talk about how they apply to our personal. But I do want to say this about the text in James, because I went and found this blog, and it says, those of you who say, tomorrow I'm going to go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. That's speaking to business people. Sure. It looks like. And then this blog I read talked about the Jewish businessmen who traveled throughout the empire, or business people, In the New Testament, Aquila and Priscilla were tent makers in Rome who relocated to Corinth and were active in Ephesus as well. In Acts 16, Lydia is a businesswoman who's a seller of purple from Thyatira, now living in Philippi. Even Paul could have been considered a traveling business person who was making tents from city to city as he spread the gospel. It is very specifically, even for that context, about conducting business. And, are we stretching it to say that we can apply it to our personal life? I don't think so.
No, we're going to actually really connect that.
Right.
I mean, you're going to, as we go through, and I got to watch the time because
I know.
Because as we go through, but we really want to connect this idea that, we make assumptions all the time.
We do.
And part of I'm going to say our lack of adaptability or that tension around how do I navigate these times? How do we do that? Again, the assumption there is that we actually want it to be the same as it was last month, last year. That the assumption is that it will be the same as last month, last year. And the reality is that it won't. And so the first step, even in finances and in business financial modeling is in business, what we do is we look back in history, and sometimes we look back a number of years, or we look back over 20 years, and we go, this is how the economy reacted, let's say 2009 to the crisis that happened in the US. And there's a lot of similarities, and we see a lot of data points. And again, those data points are really important in business, that we see those data points and we go, hey, we can recognize some of those data points now, or maybe all of those data points. And so we make a model, or we make an assumption that the response is going to be the same. That, okay, what happened in 2009, we can bring that into 2023, and we can start making decisions, financial decisions, on how to do that, because somebody went through that, or we all went through that in 2009. We see these similarities in 2023. And so let's respond in a way that, again, maybe some of the lessons we learned from 2009, we can apply to 2023. Right. And, again, so
when businesses do financial models, they're actually taking financial statements, they're taking balance sheets, income statements, cash flow statements, and they're using those and basing their financial modeling assumptions with the help of those things that have happened in the past, in the context of what is the economy looking like now? What does the world look like? And right now, we've never been so global as we are now. We were in 2009, but it's even more so now, as we've seen through the pandemic shutdowns and all of those things. Yeah. So when I put these financial assumptions,
can I make just one little thing?
Sure.
And one of the things that happens in business is you don't just make one financial assumption, one model. You do, okay, well, if this happens over here, then there's the model, or these are some of the modeling that happens because these changes are different from 2009. So, and this is where the confusion happens for most of us normal people, because we start listening to maybe the news, we start listening to the news, or we start listening to what comes out of the Bank of Canada, for example. And we're trying to go, oh, wait a minute. Like I hear this being said over here, and I hear that being said over there, and all we really want is who's right,
and we have limited understanding, so we're picking and hearing things, and we don't. I'm sure if we had some of our financial advisors, they could even speak at a deeper level to this financially model assumption.
They do it all the time.
So saying that, we come with a certain level of ignorance as the average Canadian to these things. But the point of what we want to talk about today is, and this is the question, I have two questions for you. Why do we make models? And why would we even consider having a small model for our own personal lives? Why would we want to think, oh man, this is where we were last year. Can we make the same assumptions where we're at now based on interest rates and inflation, right? So we have these discussions, and that's why some people ask you, so why is it important? Why is it important to have a model?
So, and I think, what you mentioned kind of right off the top in the sense of in our personal, we're going to
translate this working to our personal lives.
So the business to personal now, and just make that transition to personal and say, okay, so when I look back at, say, 3 years ago, when we were in the midst of the pandemic, things changed. We couldn't travel. We couldn't go out for dinner. We were restricted. We all bought way too much stuff on Amazon. Like those things. We
renovated.
Those things happened, right? And so, inside the pandemic, we did another podcast about adaptability and people's, kind of getting tired of all of the change. Well, that was massive change, and as we come out of the pandemic and as there are no lockdowns and now we can go back to, and I put in quotes, normal. That is in fact what a lot of people are asking. But what is normal? Well, change is actually normal because we are now different and our spending plans are going to look different than they did in the pandemic. They are going to look different than they did before the pandemic. And let me give you a couple of really key examples. So number one, during the pandemic, most of us barely spent any money on fuel for the car. We just plain old didn't go anywhere that we normally did. But we might have spent a lot more on technology. We might have upgraded our internet. We might have bought a new computer because we were outfitting our homes for working from home. So that maybe happened. So, and then we can throw groceries in there. Pre-pandemic, we go before that, inflation was, I'm going to say, suppressed. It wasn't, it had been in a sense suppressed by some of the way the government was manipulating the interest rates and all of that. And that was starting to move in 2016, 2017, 2018. We saw the Bank of Canada kind of moving the interest rates and moving us to what would be considered a more, I'm going to say not so much stable numbers around the economy, but more targeted numbers around the economy that the Bank of Canada wanted to hit. And then the pandemic hit and all of that got thrown out from an economic standpoint. But we see our groceries going up and we see inflation starting to increase and we see gas prices starting to go up. Yes.
Yeah, right.
And that happened starting in the pandemic, and it's, now we're seeing, in a sense, the fullness, and we've kind of normalized that. Well, now we celebrate when we see a gas price at $1.20, and I'm thinking, man,
it's not
$1.20.
I think at $1.38 we're celebrating.
Well, maybe
anyway,
you know what I mean.
So the model, but back to that question, the model is good so that we can plan.
So again, when we look at all of this change that's happened in our personal finances, the modeling, we need to go right back to 2019 and go, okay, can I look at what my spending looked like in 2019? Can I then make some tweaks to my spending plan to now in 2023 say, I need to adjust my gas. I need to adjust my groceries. I need to.
And if we're adjusting in those spaces, we maybe need to look at the other parts of our spending plan to compensate. And I'm going to say this, everyone wants to take it out of the grocery budget, but now especially now it doesn't work. Right. So that if you haven't heard that, people just say, well, I'll just take it out of the groceries. Well, I need that thing. Okay. Well, I'll just take it out of grocery money. Well, we seldom take it out of grocery money, really. But so here we've got these models. But one of the things that I was thinking about while we were talking about this at home was, well, this goes back to personally being aware of your finances.
Absolutely.
Right? So some folks who are coming to you with questions are very aware. Oh man, the interest is going up. How do it's now $250 more for my mortgage a month. Dave, what do I do? So it is wonderful that we have a certain awareness, but some people either, I don't know how you say it, either they're burying their heads and just don't want to know, or they're worrying and fearful about the future. But some are just saying, okay, let's take the emotion out of everything. Let's just take the emotion out. How then shall we live?
Right.
And that is a question that you and I asked when we started More Than Enough, because we didn't have a regular income as you coaching. I was at home with the kids, and I would ask you all the time because it was a very stressful thing for me with the Lord. It shouldn't have been stressful, maybe. Shoulds are never great to say, but it felt stressful because I thought, what if I'm doing this wrong? Like, and I don't know if any of you out there are feeling that way, but I felt that way. Dave, we don't have a regular income. Like, do I buy fishy crackers? Like, I know this sounds funny to some who are listening, but as a person who buys the groceries, well, what kind of groceries should I just be buying? Bread and butter, or, or maybe not even butter because that's expensive. Like, how shall we then live? And this is how, Dave, do we have an answer?
Well, I think the answer, and we really don't want to make it too simple, and we don't want to make it too complicated. But one of our everyday sayings in the office is financial awareness creates empowerment.
Right.
And so the idea here is that just like the modeling that we do, we need to look at what is our spending, what money do we have available, and making the plan and saying, okay, I need to first of all make the plan, then I need to live the plan, and that plan again has a beginning, a middle, and end. We've talked about this in lots of other podcasts around how do we make a plan, but I think it's significant in this time as we talk about there seems to be so many moving pieces, and so how do we navigate that? Well, being financially aware, not giving up and saying, just throwing your hands up and saying, I'm just tired of managing money. And I like to use this metaphor, if I can use the metaphor to help. Most of us that are listening will have driven a vehicle at some point. And so when you get into a vehicle, there are things that you just do, and you do them almost unconsciously. You get in the seat, you pull the seat belt on, you put the key in the ignition. If your car has one, you put your foot on the brake and you push the button, or you turn the key to start it. Now, for most of the vehicles, there's some safety. So there's things, and then you get kind of settled in, you might adjust the radio. Those things then they move from automatic. So there's some automatic things that happen to some, hey, sometimes I turn the radio on, sometimes I don't turn the radio off. And then as you're driving down the road, it's not like you're on autopilot. Your hands are on the steering wheel. You're paying attention to what's happening around you. This is what it takes to drive a car. And so these things just happen. And you know that if I get in the car to drive, then I am going to have to do these things. Again, some are automatic, but most of them are not. Most of them are intentional. This is the way we manage money. If your goal is to somehow say, well, I'd like to be on autopilot and not have to manage money, well, that's just not going to work. Then, what sometimes I say tongue in cheek, if you don't want to manage money, then don't make any money. And that means you won't have to manage it. You'll just not have any. And that's really easy to manage. I don't recommend that, especially if you're in a couple and you say, well, I'll just let my spouse manage the money. That is not a recipe in the sense of you want to work together. So financial awareness creates empowerment.
Right. You're not really serious that you don't want people making money, but it's the seriousness of management. So one thing you didn't mention was the rearview mirrors. Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to really get into that in terms of limited time, but the assumption is, right, that when we're talking about assumptions that I can somehow manage, I can somehow kind of walk through life and do it without managing money. And that's incorrect assumption. You will need to manage money the rest of your life if you are going to do that. So, that's just the way that money works.
So when we look back at the pandemic and lockdown, we shouldn't, there's the shoulds again. It would be wise to understand that we can't base our financial model personally for this coming year on the CERB we got, or I just realized that I read an article that CRA is now clawing back child tax benefits if you
if you took CERB and they're clawing it back.
They're clawing it back. They haven't clawed it back since 2020, but they are doing it now in 2023. And that's been hard on some folks. It's come as a surprise to some. But so there are things that are happening that the assumptions we have been making, I guess that's the point. We can't make any assumptions, but what we can do is project that certain things are happening this year, and how do we just adjust our spending plan and our planning to meet what's actually happening in real time in real life.
Okay, so there's two things, and as we wrap up in terms of the last minute. So number one, there is the practical side. We just talked a lot about financial awareness creates empowerment. There is the practical side. You need to know how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, and where you are going to spend that. And you need to do that with diligence and consistency. Mm-hmm. And then there's the James that says, if the Lord wills it. There's, again, we have another saying that we say often, make every spending decision a spiritual one. That we know that the resources we have find their origin in God, in Christ. He supplies all of our needs according to his riches and glory for his purposes here on earth. And so as we get that in our souls and in our minds and in our hearts, as we get that, we can go, oh, now I can navigate these times, and I can do so without fear. And immediately in my mind, the scene of Peter coming out of the boat, right? Mm-hmm. It's a season there. They're doing their thing. They're trying to get from point A to point B. They know how to sail. They know how to navigate the boat. The storm comes up and Jesus is not with them. They see this apparition and they're like, ooh, what is that? It looks like a ghost. Wait a minute, it's Jesus. And then Peter says, hey, I want to be with you. I want to be near you. If it's really you, tell me to come. And that's sometimes what we have to do in our finances is we go, Lord, if this is really, like, if you're really asking me to spend money in this way, or if you're really asking me to make this change or to do this thing, then okay, Lord, show me what it looks like to come out of the boat. And again, a lesson we can learn from Peter is keep your eyes on Christ. Mm-hmm. Don't look at the storm. Mm-hmm. When he looked at the storm, fear set in and he started to sink, and Jesus still rescued him. But the reality is when we make those things, we can say to Jesus, Lord, I'm going to keep my eyes on you, and you're going to tell me how to spend money every single day. Today has enough, and tomorrow has enough trouble for tomorrow. Right. So Jesus says, today has enough. Figure that out, spend that, stay in that, keep your eyes on me, and both the practical and the spiritual then come together.
Wow. There's a lot today that we didn't say.
There's a lot. There were some notes here, I think.
So, Lord, I just want to thank you at the end of our time today when we're talking about assumptions, Lord, that you would grant us wisdom as your people, as your followers, as your disciples to navigate this shifting sand. And Lord, like that analogy and story you gave, that we would dig deep into the foundation and build our house on rock and build it on you and not on the shifting understanding of what's happening in the world around us. Lord, grant us this wisdom in Jesus' name.
Amen. So I want to give a quick shout out to Financial Discipleship Canada and the support they give us and for sponsoring the show today. Of course, if you are listening on the local radio station here, CHRA 99.1, but we're also on iTunes, Spotify, all of those podcasting platforms, and YouTube as well. And join us next week when we talk money.
Let's Talk Money is a division of More Than Enough Financial Fitness, where God is transforming hearts and bringing hope for today and freedom for tomorrow. For more information or to comment on today's show, please visit morethanenough.ca.